Welcome, everyone. Thanks for those of you who are here in person. Thanks for making the drive this morning. And those of you on the webinar, on the phone, welcome. For those who are here, a couple of housekeeping. The restrooms are just across the foyer. And if you need to talk, the microphone on your desk, you'll push the button down, and that will activate it, and then turn it off after you speak. And that way, we'll be muted just as the people on the webinar on the phone are muted. So we're going to start. We have many people on the phone on the webinar. So we're going to read the list of who is on the webinar right after we go around the room quickly. And if you will just say your name and your organization, then we'll know who's here. I'll start with myself. I'm Letty Bass, one of the co-chairs with Melissa of the Program Quality and Alignment Committee. And I'm delighted to just be here welcoming everyone. And then we'll start with business. Can we start right here?
Yes.
And be sure to turn the microphone on for your table.
Angela Benzagri with the Office of Early Childhood. Kristen Lane with the Office of Early Childhood. Lisa Schluter with the Office of Early Childhood. Mary Alice Cohen, Office of Early Childhood. Lindsay Dorneman, Office of Early Childhood. Nina Walker with Clayton Early Learning. Kelly Jo Haynes. Sandra Random with Teach for America, Colorado.
Charlotte Brantley, still co-chairing the ECLC's Data Committee with Susan Steele and doing some consulting work now with the National Educator Learning Network.
Scott Roginski, Office of the Governor.
Pamela Harris, Mile High Early Learning, and co-chair of the Early Professional Development. ECPD. Heather Craiglow, Office of Early Childhood. Brittany Lane, Department of Higher Ed.
Alex Caldwell, Colorado Health Institute.
Nicole Reel with Executives Partnering to Invest in Children.
Nina Bastian, Colorado Health Institute.
Good morning, Michelle Leeks with the Colorado Health Institute.
Karen Imboden with the Office of Early Childhood.
Keith Dawson with the Early Childhood Council of Boulder County.
Eileen Howard Bennett, Ensure Better Child Health and Development.
Melissa Colesman, Colorado Department of Education, and co-chair of this committee.
Welcome to the website.
Christina Howe with the Early Childhood Leadership Commission. Amanda Pelletier with the Early Childhood Leadership Commission.
Susan Steele with the Buell Foundation.
Ray Washington, Father Support Services, Family Voice Council, Father and Advocate, but I'm also here as a dad, a granddad, and a kinship provider.
Corey West, I have a infant toddler home daycare in El Paso County, and I'm also an advocate for in-home providers.
Amber Bilby, President of Colorado Association for Family Child Care.
Denise Fletcher, District Manager for La Petite Academy, and I sit on the board of the Early Childhood Education Association of Colorado.
Kelly Bowes, Denver's Early Childhood Council.
Lisa Matter, Expanding Quality in Infant Toddler Care, Office of Early Childhood.
Hi, good morning. Jen Rhodes, Constellation Philanthropy. Morgan Yankee, Early Milestones, Colorado. Carrie Germeroth, Marzano Research.
Hi, Jennifer Stedron, Early Milestones, Colorado.
Hi, Teresa Rapstein, Healthy Child Care, Colorado.
Ben Gusley, Lakeshore Learning Materials.
And now we'll read the names of those on the webinar. So
Alexandra Murphy.
Alicia Lacombe Emile, Anna Marie Neal, Karen Rosa, Kathy Fabiano, Colleen O'Neill, Connie Fixon, Dawn Clow, Deborah Young, Alina Backmeister, Emily Sirota, Erin Milwini, Eva Jankowski, Heather Hanna, Heather Matthews, Ida Rhodes, J.C. Montoya Price, Jamie Wright, Jennifer Anton, Jennifer O'Brien, Joyce Johnson, Kelly Hurtado, Kimberly Rhino, Christina Hale, Lenita Hartman, Lilith Huff Munoz, Linda Meredith, Lisa Jansen Thompson, Lisa Sater, Lucille Echohawk, Mary Hefferman, Mary Martin, Megan Rains, Michelle Stewart, Michelle Sharp, Noemi Aguilar, Olivia Gillespie, Rick Bonus, Sandra Gregory, Sarah Daly, Sherry Valdez, Sue Lomiller, Terry Hammond.
Wonderful. Well, there's interest in this topic today, as you can tell. We will start with approval of the minutes from the September 13th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve? Thank you, Melissa. Second? Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. The minutes are approved. We're going to kick it off with Lindsay Dorneman, and as our others come up to present, they can introduce themselves, and that way we can keep this flowing. Lindsay, I'm going to turn it to you.
Good morning, everyone. For folks on the webinar, please note that you're muted, so if you do have questions during presentations, make sure to type them into the chat box and we'll address them for you. All right, so kicking off, as a reminder, Colorado Shines Brighter is the state's preschool development grant. We're about helping prepare children so that they can be ready to enter and succeed when entering kindergarten. We have 3 key outcomes, one focusing on supporting quality in formal childcare environments, one about supporting informal childcare environments, and a third outcome that focuses on aligning and coordinating the systems across birth to 5 services. Our timeline. So right now, we're in October. Over the past 9 months, we've been engaged in a number of activities. Most recently, we've really been focusing on the needs assessment strategic plan. So I really thank those partners for coming today to be able to present on those. And at the same time, we're starting our renewal application. So as you can imagine, everybody's kind of in a sprint right now as we work through some of these deliverables. But we are in the process of requesting a no-cost extension, and so we do expect to be able to extend the activities that we're implementing in year 1 through February of 2020. If we receive a renewal grant, that will actually kick off in January, so we'll actually be doing some double duty for a couple months. Okay. So as a reminder, our year 1 grant focused on these key activities. So developing a strategic plan that's informed by our needs assessment, looking at how we can leverage existing resources and programs and more effectively use those, especially for the purpose of increasing engagement and access to families, encouraging partnerships, which is why everybody is in the room today or on the webinar, noting that you are key partners in this work and that we want you involved. Improving transitions, so focusing on supporting children as they enter kindergarten, but also thinking about other transitions children experience from 0 to 5. And then also making sure that parents have choice across the mixed delivery system to find the programs and services that best meet their needs as well as the needs of their child. So looking at our key activities, this is kind of what the inside my brain looks like today. So normally you would see a more linear map of how we're approaching each of these activities, but due to our time frame and how things shook out, we're actually engaged in all 4 of these activities, including one more, which is evaluation planning, at the same time. And so it's important to note that as we're going through these next few months, we're really trying to make sure that we're connecting needs assessment, strategic plan, renewal application, as well as the work that we're doing to set some foundations for years 2 to 4. At the same time, we're really trying to be intentional to connect these activities the best we can so that we have a cohesive plan moving forward that's representing family needs, that's defining our path forward, and ensuring we get the funding to be able to implement that plan. So throughout these activities, I just want to illustrate some of the great work that everybody has been doing to engage our stakeholders and partners. Both of our needs assessment and strategic planning teams will speak to this a little bit more, but the OEC has also been engaging in some additional activities to engage our partners. This is only a sample, so this doesn't include everything, but collectively we've gathered more than 8,000 inputs into the work that we're doing, and that includes more than 4,900 inputs from families. So we've done a really great job to try to represent the interests of the families and our partners in this work. Looking at the column from OEC, so you'll see that we've done a number of surveys, we've done some focus groups, we've done some work groups, some other activities. In addition to the activities up here, I just want to say thank you to the ECLC for giving us a platform to be able to engage partners across different topic areas. I want to say thank you to HICPA for being a great partner in the Innovations in Early Childhood and Medicaid project. I also want to thank RAISE and other partners who have allowed us to reach communities across the state with Senate Bill 63 work. Also to everybody who's invited us to be a partner and to come to your meetings. So thinking about Healthy Childcare Colorado, ECLA, the CDHS Family Voice Council, there's a lot more, the CDCBs, and we continue to engage with you, and thank you for your partnership as we start planning forward. So in the OEC's outreach and engagement, we've been able to identify some key themes. Later today, you'll also hear themes that have emerged through the needs assessment and strategic plan. So this is not comprehensive in terms of what we heard from our partners or families. So some of the key things that the office has heard about is the need for increased access to infant toddler care and affordable care in general. We've also heard about barriers to child care licensing, especially impacting family child care homes. There are needs for greater support, not only for children and families as they transition across programs and into kindergarten, but also supports for educators. We've also seen a need for increased supportive services for families and providers, so thinking about early childhood mental health specialists, coaching, and other consultative services. There's also been a desire for the state to better align programs, rules, processes, and supports so that individuals who are operating in the field know where to go or who to go to for support. Also just making sure that what we put out into the field is easily accessible and that the processes we develop are ones that don't create additional barriers. Of course, our workforce has emerged, and it's not just child care providers, but looking at this whole spectrum of birth to 5 services. And so how do we better recruit and retain that workforce and support higher or better compensation for those workers? And then finally, making sure that the state has a commitment to mixed delivery. So especially as we start moving towards some really big initiatives in our state, such as full-day kindergarten and universal pre-K, making sure that we recognize that, again, parents want a choice as to where their child could be best served and making sure that choice exists. And I know I'm moving quickly, so if you do have questions, we'll make sure we have some time for that. So as we look to the renewal grant, again, we're going to be taking lessons learned from our needs assessment, information and solutions gathered from strategic planning, as well as our own work to inform that renewal application. So the funding announcement dropped on September 20th, and it's due November 5th. So you can imagine that our focus is pretty heavily on that renewal application. Colorado is in a band of second-tier states, so they, excuse me, What they did is that they broke states out into 3 tiers based on a calculation of vulnerable children and populations in that state. So Colorado sits in the middle tier, making us eligible for up to $12.5 million per year over 3 years. So we're looking at about $37 million over the next 3 years. We do intend to try to go for the max because 1, we have a lot of work to do, and 2, it's there, right? And we can do a lot with that funding. The renewal grants are asking folks to expand on their initial grant work. So taking the work that the state has been doing within this first year and building on those efforts. They're also asking states to implement collaboration, coordination, and quality improvement activities among existing programs across the state's mixed delivery system. So again, leveraging those resources that we have. It's also asking us to expand access to families and children with a target on vulnerable, underserved, and rural families. We're able to do this not only by leveraging what exists, but if the need is out there and it's a viable solution, also developing new programs to serve those families. And then finally, again, underscoring that alignment and coordination so that we can engage parents, prepare children to enter kindergarten, and really improve a lot of those transitions that children and families experience. So within this, we have some similar guardrails to the first year. We have to use existing federal, state, local, and non-governmental resources efficiently to strengthen existing programs. So again, really building on what's working well and expanding that. They want us to improve the coordination and delivery of systems across models and funding streams in the mixed delivery system. They want us to develop recommendations to better use existing resources to improve the overall participation of children, especially those that are vulnerable and underserved. They want us to improve program quality while making sure we can maintain access and availability. They also want us to continue to maximize family and parental choice, knowledge, and engagement with existing programs in our mixed delivery system, and easing access to access those services. And finally, enhancing the school readiness of children for low-income and disadvantaged families, effectively transitioning them into elementary programs. So that condenses down to 6 key activities. Some of these look familiar from the 5 activities that we had to implement in year 1. So again, we'll be focusing on the needs assessment. So Colorado does not plan to complete its needs assessment until the end of the year. That doesn't disqualify us or create any type of punitive action in terms of the points we can score in our application. Instead, we'll be able to talk about the findings that we've learned to date, our process, and provide a guarantee that we'll finish this work by the end of the year. Same goes for the strategic plan. We'll want to identify what that team has been doing in partnership with the OEC and others to develop that plan and what we know to date about how that plan is going to look. Activity 3 has expanded a little bit, so it used to just be maximizing parent choice and knowledge. Now it's focusing on engagement, and in addition to that, really honing in on supporting a child's early learning and development. So how can we engage families to be able to do that and help their children more? Sharing best practices remains the same, except it has a greater focus on professional development. So instead of sharing best practices across early childhood providers, it's now also focusing on how we can improve professional development resources. Activity 5 used to just be improving overall quality and service integration, and now includes expanding access and developing new programs. And so this is where we really get to have some fun and think about what is needed and what we want to try to be able to achieve these goals. And then finally, activity 6 is probably the most significant. It's awarded the most points in the application, but it's about monitoring, evaluation, and data use for continuous improvement. So they really want states to invest in data systems to ensure that where we have gaps in our needs assessment or where we may have challenges evaluating programs, that we're investing to be able to fill those gaps and create systems that allow us to measure outcomes. There are 3 sections of bonus points, so where we really want to be able to focus efforts, and that's about collaborative transitions from birth to the early grades. And so we've been in conversation with the P3 office about how we achieve that. The second one is looking at coordination, application, eligibility, and enrollment for families. So going back to some of those questions about aligning programs and systems and how can we do that better, and also how do we reduce barriers for families who need to be able to access those programs. And then finally, I think this won't be a surprise to anyone, but there's an infant toddler focus. So again, I think the work that we've done with Senate Bill 63, we are partnering with the EQ initiative program. I think we have a really strong opportunity to earn some bonus points in that area. So how are we approaching this? Fast and furious. So this is only a snapshot of some of the ideas that we're looking at that have emerged from needs assessment, strategic planning, are building on our year 1 activities, and have kind of been some brainstorms that we've developed as we've been out in the community over the last 8 or 9 months. So the first one is, again, we're going to be focusing on identifying how we've approached our needs assessment and strategic plan and the lessons learned. Secondly, we're going to focus on how we've strengthened partnerships across the state with both local agencies and state agencies that are working towards our goals. So again, partnering with the P3 office and other divisions within CDE, thinking about how we're working with CDPHE, the Department of Higher Education, the Department of Labor and Employment, the Department of Local Affairs. We're very fortunate to have a governor who is focusing on school readiness and supporting children and families. So a lot of these departments have goals that focus on that. And so it creates this opportunity that's really opportune for us to be able to identify some of those state level partnerships that then will support us at a local level. Next is implementing an OEC IT solutions roadmap. So this is really talking about how we can enhance the systems that are offered through the OEC to be more efficient, to really improve our users' experience so that they're able to engage with those systems, and also how we can improve data collection and reporting. So thinking about that 6th activity in the grant, how we're going to hit some of those targets and where we have gaps that we can now fill with this funding. Next is supporting family choice and reducing barriers and making sure that we are being very intentional and thoughtful about how we're engaging local partners as well as state partners to inform parents about what is available in their community and making sure that we have resources that are supporting how we connect families to those services. Next, thinking about increased alignment and access to consultative services for children, providers, and families. So thinking about our early childhood mental health consultants, how we improve access either through quantity or just even awareness that that service exists. Our Colorado Shines QRAS coaches, how we're able to help programs in rural areas perhaps access those services, and even child care health consultants and our EQ initiative coaches. So really, what are the alignments or supports that we can enhance through this work? Next is thinking about developing resources, training, and TA for early childhood professionals and caregivers who are entering, or caregivers that support, and caregivers as they support transitions. But this also goes beyond that and thinking about how we also support providers, especially our family child care homes, as they think about sustainable business practices and really making sure that that helps to answer some of those access issues. Next is just one sample of how we're trying to address the workforce. So we're writing in some strategies about providing scholarships, particularly around the CDA, and so making sure that early childhood professionals have an opportunity to not only enter the field quickly, but also grow professionally. Next is continuing again to support providers through technical assistance training and additional resources, and this goes beyond just our formal providers, but also thinking about those informal caregivers and parents so that they have what they need to be able to support children and create quality environments. In addition to that, how are we also supporting those local organizations that focus on informal and formal care providers and helping them better support providers as well? And then finally, we will be implementing a program performance evaluation plan. This plan will allow us to do some checkpoints so that we can focus on continuous quality and improvement. And also within this, we want to make sure that we continue to engage stakeholders. And so leveraging parent voice again, so making sure that we're connecting with the CDHS Family Voice Council, some of the parent engagement activities that CDE engages in, making sure that we continue to work with our partners in the room today, and all of those that we have engaged throughout this process to make sure that we're on the right track, that we're having this continuous feedback loop so that if we do need to course correct or think about things differently during the course of this project, that we're doing that. So again, small snapshot, more to come as we continue to learn more from our needs assessment and strategic plan. So with that, I don't know what timing looks like, but I'm happy to take some questions before we move on. It's a lot, and your brains are just going to be like this today. So there may be some processing. Yes?
Hi, Lindsay. I was curious about the scholarships for the CDA. Is that to cover the cost of the program itself and then the cost of applying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So it's about I think it's about a $1,600 scholarship per individual.
Okay. Great.
Yep. And then with that, we also are thinking about adding some coaching resources to help those professionals who are going through that process.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yep.
Quick question around the transition work. In terms of stakeholder engagement, I know you're working with P3 with Angie and the folks at CDE. Are there efforts also underway right now to engage kindergarten teachers, kindergarten providers, elementary schools?
Yeah, so one of the thoughts around this is really engaging the National P3 Center to help us do a statewide transitions agenda that would then include local stakeholders as well for engagement. So thinking about LEAs, teachers, and others, because a lot of the conversations that we've been having with P3 are that it's not just about those sending organizations, but also the receiving organizations. And I think what you're saying too is in complete alignment with what we've heard is that teachers in kindergarten classrooms also need support, especially as they're dealing or working with children who may have special needs. Yep. Yes?
You mentioned mixed delivery. What exactly does that look like and how will that work? Because as a private provider, we are concerned about universal pre-K going into schools.
Yeah, so mixed delivery in this sense is pretty broad in terms of how the grant defines it and how the OEC wants to apply it. So we're looking at both formal and informal providers and all existing license types. And so we do want to make sure that we're making sure parents have that choice so that if their child, they don't want their child's program to be offered by a school district, that they also have other opportunities in their community to be able to place their child in then different programs. So we actually did quite a bit of surveying both within strategic plan and the needs assessment to identify where children currently are, as well as if parents had a choice without any barrier to accessing the ideal program, what would that choice be? And I think that the results of that are pretty representative of the need of having that broader mixed delivery system.
Does CPP factor in this at all?
So yes, through the P3 office, CPP is definitely a program. It's one of the programs that was looked at through the needs assessment, and so definitely evaluating need and preferences around that program.
Thank you.
Yep.
Question online from Eva Jankowski.
Do you want to use your mic? Thank you.
Who will administer the CDA scholarships and coaching supports? From Eva Jankowski.
So the CDA administration is currently planned through the Office of Early Childhood, and then local support such as coaching would likely be contracted through local organizations such as the ECCs.
Yes, sir?
Tell us more about the place of family support, home visiting, and services for children under 3.
Yes, so we are definitely working with partners within our office to identify what some of those services are. There, of course, is a heavy emphasis on childcare for children 0 to 3, but we're also looking at supports through home visiting. So in year 1, we conducted a pilot program that expanded home visiting to informal and family child care home providers, and so we anticipate continuing that through this, at least through the first year of the renewal period. We're also looking at how we can provide resources to anyone caring for children 0 to 5, focusing on transitions. And so knowing that a child's transition is not just into kindergarten, but there are a large number of transitions in that 0 to 3 space. How can providers help those children? And within that, we've also been talking to our early intervention program as well as the Part B 619 administrator about how we support children who may have some unique needs, and how providers can get resources or even enhance their own knowledge to be able to support those children.
Elena Beckmeister asks, how are issues of equity and inclusion being addressed or considered?
So again, regarding issues of equity and inclusion, we're really looking at some of those supportive services and how we can prepare anybody working with young children, whether they're a formal provider, whether they're a local organization that supports providers, whether they're a parent even, about how they can access the resources that are necessary to support those children. We've also been, again, working with the Part B administrator as well as Part C, so Early Intervention Colorado, to think about classrooms and how we can help providers make sure classrooms are set up in a way that are more inclusive. And then in year 1, too, Karen and Bowden keeps nodding her head, but we're doing a QRIS work group that's also looking at issues of equity. And depending on what comes out of that work group, we hope to implement some of those recommendations as we move into years 2 to 4. Yes, Ray?
As we do that, how do we or how can we prioritize and enhance fatherhood engagement in that process? Because there's certainly an area of opportunity.
Yes. So talking to you. Yeah. So again, throughout this, we need to continue to engage families, and that's, I think, one of the more interesting opportunities within this grant is that they actually want us to build the capacity of families, not only in terms of engaging with services, but also building out parents as advocates. So advocates for their children, advocates in their community. And so, Ray, I think that's a great emphasis point within that activity that we would love to explore. Yes?
I'm curious if there are any specific strategies being considered looking at different needs for rural versus metro, and like very unique targeted strategies for rural who have greater access issues.
There are. So as we think about alignments across consultative services or coaching or any of those supports, our intention is actually to focus on rural communities where we know there are gaps. Also with the needs assessment, I think that's revealing some interesting and probably not surprising gaps in rural communities that we'll want to address. So as that information comes forth, then we can start targeting those resources better. But again, you know, as we look at the requirements of the renewal application, they actually added a definition of rural areas to the funding announcement to underscore that emphasis. Christina, do we have time for a couple more, or are we? One more. Okay. Scott, the floor is yours. You get one.
I have a multi-pronged question. Just kidding. When you were talking about the needs assessment, the initial grant finishing up in the timeline, you were saying that on the 29th, on LEAP Day, the 29th of February, when it's not ending, you're going to be doing initial strategies. And I wonder, what does that mean and what does that entail?
Oh, sure. So what that's in reference to is that the initial grant year is expected to extend through February 29th in 2020. So when we talk about initial strategies, that's really the year one activities that we've committed to through our grants, the ability to wrap up those activities. However, the needs assessment strategic plan should be complete by the end of this calendar year. And we really hope to be able to disseminate that beginning in January.
And what will those initial strategies be? Do you have a sense of that?
So again, it's just a continuation of what exists. So the work groups that we're doing under quality rating and improvement, so looking at aligning competencies, credentials, that framework, continuing activities that allow us to retool QRIS, so moving from ERS to ERS3. The home visiting pilot program will be able to continue operating under year one funding. The communication strategies that we engaged in, so updating the ELDGs, as well as exploring a statewide campaign, training and tools to support parents. That work will need to continue through just because we got a really late start on it. Also looking at some of the organizational capacity work that we're doing with early childhood councils and family resource centers. So again, anything that we've committed to doing in year one, it's just a continuation of those activities. We're not allowed to build in anything new, so it's just really giving us time to wrap those up, given the late start we had this year. However, I would say with that, the year 2 to 4 activities will likely launch in January. So then under that funding, so we'll be under 2 grants, hopefully, for a couple months. So while we wrap up those first year activities, then we'll start kicking off anything new that we propose for years 2 to 4. So we'll be busy, just a little. All right, well, thank you. If there's additional questions, feel free to reach out to me directly or to anybody on my team. Again, I just want to extend a huge thank you. This would be impossible without everybody who's participating today.
So thank you for welcoming us back. My name is Nina Bastian from the Colorado Health Institute. I'm here with my colleague Michelle Leek, and we have Heather Matthews on the phone. Heather, should we do a check so that we can hear you?
Good morning, everyone.
Thank you. So we're going to try and take our 30-minute slot and crunch it in half for you so that we get to all of the content today.
I actually have a friendly amendment to that.
Oh, okay.
So one of the desires is to have good connection between the needs assessment and the strategic plan. And so we're doing a little work in the back, a little huddle. And so in a collaborative exercise, we're going to take 30 minutes for the needs assessment, 30 minutes for the strategic plan. That will put us back on track and you can go about your day.
Okay, great.
Late breaking news.
So I'm just going to open up talking a little bit about what you'll expect to see in the needs assessment, just from a high level. Michelle will talk through kind of the key needs and potential approaches to address those needs that we have found. Heather will talk through developing shared definitions, and we have a short activity to go along with that, and then we'll wrap up with where we're headed. So briefly, our needs assessment, we're sort of thinking of it in these 4 buckets. We open with building from a great foundation, so that's the context in Colorado, that's all the great work that is being done now, that has been done over the last several decades, and really highlighting the existing work, not just at the state, but also at the local level. Today, we will kind of bring to you the summary of top 12 is in quotations because it's ballooned to 14 right now. That number is in flux. But these needs and associated opportunities and potential approaches are sort of our headlines. This is where we're really connecting in with the strategic plan and with Lindsay on existing work for their application. The bulk of our needs assessment is going to be analyses of services and programs. And so we have spoken with many of you in the room and on the phone not just in the early care and learning programs, but also extending to the family and community support programs. So you will see some really robust content and data analysis around, I think around 20 programs and services that we've identified. And we will also be sure to include all of our approaches, both quantitative and qualitative, to how we have collected this information and completed our analyses. Any questions on kind of the general framework of the needs assessment? All right, Michelle, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Do I need to be close to this?
Oh, no,
or no?
the camera.
Oh, okay. I want to be on camera and
Not as close.
So good morning.
Good morning.
It's great to be here with all of you and to share with you a couple of things we want to accomplish with you today. We want to share with you sort of the headlines that are emerging from this assessment, and we also want to share with you sort of back to basics the definitions that we're using on 5 key definitions, because they're so foundational and so important to the work that we're doing, that we're going to ask you to weigh in and ensure that we're on the right track and we're thinking all about the same things at the same time. I really appreciated Lindsay's overview of the application process, because it sort of feeds into our thinking about the ultimate deliverable of the needs assessment. I'm also a very competitive person, so I've been doing a little sleuthing online, and I've been looking at what's going on in places like Delaware and Massachusetts and Nebraska and Pennsylvania and California in terms of what they're doing for their needs assessment. And I think we have 3 really unique things that we're doing here in Colorado that are well beyond the needs assessment, but I just want to call them out to your attention. First of all, everyone's doing outreach, and everyone's going out into community, but the outreach that we've done is really, really significant. I think it's far and wide, reaching 3,000 families through our survey, the kinds of work that we've done in communities throughout the state of Colorado, I think will set us apart in terms of not the activity itself, but the reach that we've had on that activity. The second component is probably the hardest thing we've ever done at CHI, and that's the analytical model, this child care model that we're looking at in terms of early care and learning. I didn't have any gray hair 6 months ago when I started this project. That's a lie. I went gray super early. But some of these gray hairs are part of that. But I think the model itself is really significant, because we've taken all the components of how we define as a community early care and learning, and not only sort of quantify the current and desired state within those programs, but also looking at them holistically. I think we'll see a lot of states that say we need to do a better job in terms of data. We will certainly have that same message, but we will have a lot more detail around units of measurement and understanding the difference between slots and funding and how they relate to each other, understanding the layers of funding that make it so complicated to count and quantify need in current state as well as desired state. But I think we're making a lot of advances, and I'm particularly excited about that. And the third thing that I think we do really uniquely and differently here in Colorado is how we think about the entire environment or ecosystem around early care and learning. And when I look at the early needs assessments that are out there, they're really limited in terms of defining the early care and learning environment as just that, without thinking about home visitation, without thinking about early intervention, and not thinking about fostering well-being, those kinds of sort of categories and things that we know are so important to the outcomes in early care and learning. I think those are the things that set us apart. So I just wanted to share that with you, because I think that we're doing really innovative and groundbreaking work here in Colorado. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to run through the top headlines. Last night there were 12, today there are 14. Who knew? Not me, but I'm going to ask you 2 questions. The first is, These are the headline stories. There's going to be detail behind these. There's going to be explanation behind these. So please concentrate on, like, you're just glancing in at, like, you know, the front page of the Huffington Post or something like that. These are the headlines that we're going to lead with. I'm curious as whether or not they resonate with you in your work. And second of all, are we missing something? Are you looking at this? And I think it's really so interesting that we have formal and informal care providers in the room. We have people who are advocates. We have people who are thinking about the system. So we have all these perspectives from different places. So does it resonate with you? And is there anything missing? Does that sound fair for the next 14 headlines? Okay, how does this, here's my magic clicker? Okay. All right, yeah, well, maybe, does it work? Where does it go to click? Where do we go to click? What do we point at? Can you advance your slides? Thank you. All right. So Lindsay has these 6 goals. We're aligning the application and a lot of the work that we do in the PDG realm around these 6 goals, and so we're adhering to that structure as we move through the headlines. And what I've done here is I've sort of couched things as the need that has surfaced, and then we have some suggested approaches which will align really directly with the strategic plan and the way forward around these things, and so these are just suggestions. So under align and coordinate systems, I won't read these verbatim, but the first is really emphasizing the need for unduplicated data, of thinking about an architecture that incorporates all of the data and systems in the early care and learning environment, and then extending beyond that because we're thinking so broadly about what's important to kids. We also, the second need there is measuring our progress. What is this outcome that we're trying to measure? How do we think about that? How do we quantify it? And how do we measure that across different programs, services, and the entire system? Next slide. Innovating service delivery. We see what's emerging from the work that we're doing on both the qualitative and quantitative side is that we're looking to create an early childhood system that's inclusive of all kids, including those and especially those with developmental delays and disabilities. It's certainly not limited to that, but from what we're hearing in communities, this is an area where we could do better. We want to create better access to early childhood mental health services, think about how those are incorporated and integrated into both formal and informal care settings. And we want to streamline the administrative processes to increase capacity within the early care system. So a lot of that has to do with licensing, maintaining your license, getting your license in the first place. This idea that has emerged in the comments that we've had around fatherhood and informal caregiving, parent knowledge, particularly in the transition process. Parents need to be more informed, and we're going to take that on as a community to figure out how to do that. We know that we need to do a better job in terms of the supports and education, and through more effective outreach, this will have some linkages to the strategic plan. And then, of course, another need that has emerged is really thinking through transitions. In the PDG documentation, that seems to really focus on transitions into kindergarten, but I think in our broader definitions of the world or the context around early care and learning, we're thinking about transitions in and out of informal and formal situations. We're thinking about moving from friends and family into and out of systems. Parents and caregivers need supports in all of those kinds of transitions, not just the one to school. In terms of the fourth major goal of the PDG is this idea of creating meaningful and more equitable access. Of course, that's top of mind in all the work that we do, but what we're hearing crying from parents throughout the state is, can we possibly make both formal and informal care settings more convenient and affordable and accessible and open in weekends and at nights, and can they align with when I work, those kinds of things. So we're gonna spend some time really thinking through that, particularly in, a big emphasis on infant and toddlers and how do we create more availability, more slots in that world. And I think one of the things that we've heard loud and clear is that affordability is not an issue for low-income families. Affordability is an issue for low-income families and middle-income families. Everyone struggles with affordability in this world. The fifth goal is to strengthen business practices. No matter how you're involved or how you're providing care in the early care and learning space, how can that be a viable business for not only you as the owner or the operator of that business, but for your employees and the people who work there? So what are the things that we can bring to bear, toolkits or I don't know what those are. Those are going to be in the strategic plan. But the need is like, let's make this into a viable business practice for people. What does that look like? Are there ways in which we can not enhance reimbursement, but to make sure that you know of all the different funding streams and that you have the business operations, the back office support that you need in order to really make this into viable and sustainable businesses. So we're thinking deeply about that issue. And then finally, we have to build on this foundation that we have in Colorado around the quality and the programming that we provide in early care environments. I want to build on that foundation that many of you have spent many years building here in Colorado, right? So we want to build on the shoulders of that work to create even better quality and more safer environments for kids and for the workforce as we think about this. Those are the top headlines. You have ways to communicate with me, and I know because we're, sort of on the clock here, you can reach out to me versus email. Nina's going to tell you about a way that we have a fancy Google Doc to send information to us. So that's online and in the room. There are ways to do that. But maybe I take just 2 questions right now, and the rest of them you can find me afterwards.
You have a whole, 10 minutes.
Well, we still have more to do.
We have more to do. So this is only my part of the show. Then we got the Nina show. Okay. Yeah. Yes, Susan.
So quick question, is it your job or whose job to prioritize 14? Because we couldn't do 14 all at once, probably.
I don't know, Lindsay.
Yeah, so the answer to that is really within the application, we're going to have to prioritize based on sustainability, on reach and outcomes. But the thing that we are working with strategic planning on is that the strategic plan is going to be broader than a renewal application. And so that's going to be a bigger effort. That's why we're coming to PQA, while we'll be at the ECLC meetings the next couple months, is to help get feedback to guide some of that prioritization.
So some of it will be opportunity and some of it will be...
Yeah, well, definitely, within the renewal application, because we're aligning that to strategic plan, some of what will be in the plan really is funded, guaranteed to happen, but then we'll also have some of these other pieces that we'll need partners to help us build on. But again, we want to have conversations about how we're prioritizing that so that it is reflected if it's a state priority.
I'll try to be quick. I noticed that you used the term facility in there a few times in your last couple of slides, when maybe it's really talking about program, what went beyond it. But there are actual facility needs that we know have been identified around being required to have fire sprinklers, for example, in a family child care home that are standing in the way. And so I would just encourage you to maybe put a couple of examples into that are actually hard physical, the space needs, not just the program needs, so that they're not lost.
Okay, I appreciate that. We've heard a lot and a lot of comments about that in our community outreach, our focus groups, and that. But I appreciate the comment and note it. It will get in. Yeah.
This is Pamela Harris, Mile Early Learning. I understand that you have lots of needs that people have shared, and it also seems like there's a lot of resources in the community who can help do some of those things. What's your plan for perhaps going back to the same stakeholders and saying, how would you help us solve these issues?
So that is actually part of our strategic planning work. So they've been doing a number of focus groups, stakeholder interviews, as well as family outreach to do more of a solutions approach to some of these needs. And so that's something that that team will be able to address next.
Yeah.
There's one more. So under goal number 2, you talk about developmental delays and disabilities. Does that include health-related disability and delays?
Yes. Okay. And so one of the things we're going to talk about are these definitional questions, right? And so, when we talk about transitions, what do we mean? When we talk about disabilities, what do we mean by that? But the conversations that we've had are both developmental as well as physical disabilities, and the emphasis is on making environments inclusive of all, right? And so that includes it. Thank you. Great. All right, we're moving on. Okay. We're not moving on.
Access and affordability is a critical factor for migrant families.
Yes.
So how have you incorporated that?
Yeah. So we have our focus groups. We offer translation services, and so we heard from a number of different people and families who are migrants and who are immigrants to the state and are really looking for affordable solutions. And so I think that we have those voices captured in the qualitative data that we've conducted. Great. All right, now we're moving on. Okay, thanks, guys. Heather, do we have you? You're on.
Yes, I'm on.
All right. You want to walk us through the
Sure.
next couple slides, Heather?
I wasn't sure if you were going to kick something off. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for the opportunity to talk through definitions today. I'm Heather Matthews, and I'm an independent consultant, and I've been working with CHI on the needs assessment. And I would imagine at the mention of definitions, a few people pulled out their phones. I hope that's not the case, as I think the definitions that we're referring back to are going to be really important in doing the work moving forward. If we intend to move forward together on these Colorado Shines Brighter efforts, it's important to have something to point back to that we have agreed upon. I don't know if anyone's had that experience where, we think we're all talking about the same thing with regard to, just throwing out the term childcare providers. But then you dive deeper into that conversation and suddenly questions emerge. Well, who are you really talking about? Let's build that out. And that's what these definitions are intended to do for Colorado Shines Brighter and the preschool development grant efforts. Some key principles that have gone into these definitions, I think, are reflected in the process. So if you look at the second bullet on the slide, working from existing definitions that were included in the preschool development grant application, we refined through a little bit of review by OEC staff, brief literature review of some key terms, and then reviewing the needs assessment data for Colorado specific considerations. So really the principles around that process being keeping definitions broad and relevant to many stakeholders, reflecting the research and the best knowledge that we have, and then incorporating what we are learning that is Colorado specific. And I hope that you'll find that all of those were included. Overall, if you could go to the next slide. Overall, there are 22 definitions that we've been looking at within 4 different categories. So geographic terms such as rural that talk about our geography in Colorado, outcomes definitions, for example, school readiness. How are we defining some of those outcomes terms? And then around principles such as family engagement. So terms that describe our principles as we do the work. And then population terms such as families. How are we talking about families? What are those definitions? And we've pulled from a couple of different sources, actually many different sources. So the work completed in Colorado, census, the Health and Human Services resources, accepted standards that exist, Head Start content, the American Academy of Pediatrics, as well as CDC, and a few references from the literature to help us figure out what are really those core definitions that we want to point to. The slide that you're looking at now around shared definitions are the 5 that we want to look at today that we felt were really important to elevate to a broader stakeholder group and make sure that we're getting them right. And I know that Nina is going to provide the process through which you can provide feedback. There might be a couple of different ways. I apologize, I can't be there in person. I have a prior commitment, but I did want to make sure and be able to provide a little bit on the process and what we're looking for with these definitions. A couple of nuances that footnotes that I want to provide around some of these terms. So we'll be looking at quality early childhood care and education. Nuances around this are how the standards define this, and then how parents are defining. And so those are both components that are included. Vulnerable children versus underserved children. And I think maybe,
Oh, sorry. Did you, sorry, I thought you were talking about this one. Oh. Did you want to advance the slide, Heather? I was just ahead of you.
Okay. So vulnerable children being more, what does the literature tell us in terms of children who are vulnerable for poor outcomes? But then with the underserved piece, really being able to include a Colorado specific component around who are we finding that are underserved across a couple of different arenas. School readiness has been a tough nut to crack for years, but really accessed several resources around school readiness and looking to provide, again, that broadest possible definition that's going to be relevant to many stakeholders who are doing the work. And then family, friend, and neighbor caregivers, we combined with informal care, and I think that's an area that could be interesting for some feedback on whether or not those two belong together, but really found there was so much overlap in those definitions that it made sense to bring those together. So with all of that, thanks so much for taking the time to refine these definitions. They will be important to the work moving forward. And I'm going to hand it over to Nina, who's in the room, to talk about process and providing that feedback.
Thank you, Heather. So we're going to crunch this activity a little bit, and instead of, we have some Post-it notes. Instead of asking you to get up and walk around the room now, we do have the 5 definitions posted around the room. Up here we have vulnerable children, underserved children, family, friend, and neighbor, and informal care in the back, school readiness, and quality early childhood care and education. So what I will ask is that you write feedback, think about your suggestions, what might be missing, what would you add, keeping in mind that we want the broadest definition that reaches across systems and sectors, and also we want these to be grounded in recent literature and Colorado context. So we will not take time right now to do that activity, but throughout the rest of the meeting and at the end, if you have feedback, please put a sticky note on the definition around the room. Folks on the phone, we have this website, colo.health/PDG definitions, with all the definitions that we're looking at in the room and an opportunity to provide any feedback there. Also, folks in the room, you're welcome to use that as well if you need to dip out, and please take down that website and we're happy to take your feedback. How long will that be available? Good question.
A week. Yeah.
So till next Friday. Great. Yeah. Okay. And quick next step, so we will be incorporating feedback into those definitions as appropriate. We are refining our opportunities and analysis. Our draft needs assessment is going to the OEC on November 1st with the final version of the report by December 1st. Here is my contact information. If you have any questions or feedback on some of the opportunities that Michelle had mentioned, please feel free to reach out with anything. And we will be sending these slides out afterwards, right? So folks can have that link there. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Does anybody need a pen? Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. We are also going to crunch our presentation from a planned hour into 30 minutes. But we do have an opportunity for you all to give feedback via a survey. So I'm sorry that this is a lot of talking at you. You can tell there's a lot going on, and I sort of feel like we're in around all these partners or a fugue, and there's a lot of overlapping pieces of information. But it's been a pleasure to work with CHI, and also Lindsay, thank you for conducting like 5 orchestras at once throughout this process. So very quickly, we're going to talk a little bit about the strategic plan outline and group discussion. My name is Jennifer Stedron. I'm from Early Milestones, Colorado. Carrie Germeroth is here from Marzano Research. And then we have a partner on the phone, Sarah Daly, Child Trends, who is the lead on this. We're going to buzz through the first half of this presentation and settle a little bit more in the meat, which is around the strategic plan outline and how that is coordinated with the framework and some content in there. You will hear some very, very similar and overlapping themes, and I think that's good. It means the needs assessment is finding the same things that the Office of Early Childhood has, that all points to really highlighting particular pieces that really need to happen in the coming years. So, I went the wrong way. Okay, so here are the partners doing the strategic plan development. I just want to briefly review again vision and mission of the entire effort, and mention again something that Lindsay mentioned, which is we have a strategic plan that we're developing at the same time as the implementation grant is being developed. Mostly those things are the same, but they're a little bit different in a few ways that are important. The plan is a 5-year plan, and the plan will involve multiple partners. The feedback will be the same, but I think we'll be layering in feedback and needs assessment findings, et cetera, as we go and as the years progress onto this plan. So just important to remember, very much some overlap, but some differences as well. I think Lindsay mentioned the goals of the effort have been expanded from 5 into 6. There's some definitions here that, again, we will ask you to react to through the survey, but I just wanted to put them up quickly because I think it helps us all organize the needs in the right buckets. And then the 6th goal being a sort of a monster mega goal that really talks about quality of environments and the workforce as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Carrie to talk a little bit about the activities the various organizations have embarked on to help inform the strategic plan.
So you already heard a couple different times that feedback was collected by a lot of us here in the room, and many of you were involved in helping to make that successful. So one of our first activities was started way back in April or May, collecting strategic plans and some other annual reports from state, local, regional organizations. So many of you in this room contributed those documents, and so we did an activity to align those documents with the Early Childhood Colorado framework. And so there's a memo for that is under review by the OEC right now. So we also did our own family outreach. So we did 12 focus groups with 120 different family participants. I'll show you the demographics there in just a minute. For 1,200 survey responses, Early Milestones led the stakeholder outreach with 18 interviews and 13 focus groups completed. And then we have been, had numerous discussions with the OEC and Program Quality Alignment. We've been here with you all a few times, as well as the needs assessment and evaluation teams. It's been a masterpiece in coordination. I think we all know each other really well right now. So the strategic plan alignment, just to tell you a little bit more how it was used. The results were incorporated into the interviews at Early Milestones conducted with some key informants. It'll also be used to help us prioritize activities. So, for example, like I mentioned, we aligned the activities that some of you all have in your strategic plans or goals and things that we looked at the priorities that are happening at the state, local, and regional level to see where, okay, well, there's a lot happening around quality, but there's not much happening around equity. So we're going to use that information along with the information we're gathering from you now. Multiple data points here to help prioritize those strategies that are going to ultimately end up in the plan. The family outreach, so again, 12 focus groups. Ours was really on special populations, families that may not have come to other focus groups unless you came to them and you created that opportunity in a really easy and accessible way for them. And so you see we focused with immigrant and refugee families, Spanish-speaking teen parents, low-income, low-resource American Indians, special needs, working and parents that are currently enrolled in college or post-secondary options. And then we had one of our last focus groups was on Fort Carson, down on the base with some families there. So great discussions, really interesting conversations. And then you see some of our demographic and characteristics over here of our focus group population. And this memo is being prepared for the OEC, and so all of this information can be more widely shared. I just wanted to give you a flavor of the diversity that we have in our family outreach. Same for our survey. Love it. It should be 1,200. Sorry, number. Correct. So 47% of our family survey under 65,000 in terms of household income. I'm not going to read all these for you. You can see the breakdown in terms of some of those characteristics we were talking about with our focus group. Do you want to talk about it?
Sure. Really briefly. So again, Milestones conducted stakeholder outreach that included both interviews and focus groups. That I want to thank many of you who opened up your meetings to give us space to have some focus groups, some of which we organized on our own, but we thank you for all that participation. And again, another piece of the work will be this stakeholder survey, which will be released broadly relatively soon, and the request will be to get some feedback, again, relatively soon, given the timeline of all this work and the need to really want to make sure that gets infused into the work of OEC right now on the grant. So I want to move into the strategic plan components. Again, our goal ultimately will be to help craft that strategic plan, and there are some specific federal guidance concerning that plan around goals, objectives, and strategies. You can see some of the definitions around those elements, and we've talked about the goals quite a bit. I want to just point to the third bullet under objectives, which is to make sure those align with the Early Childhood Colorado framework. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit more about today. Strategies, you've heard a sprinkling of strategies from Lindsay. We're not going to get into that today, but just know these get further fleshed out into specific strategies. And as we move along, of course, stakeholder feedback will be important in that piece, so that we're making sure some of those solutions are really the solutions that are working on the ground. So, show of hands, I think most of you know the Early Childhood Colorado Framework. Probably don't need to walk through this, is that correct? Yeah. So okay, nods, heads, nods. Okay, so my bigger point here is really that at that objective level, what we've really done to make sure that this really reflects Colorado's plan is to take these groupings and themes that we've been hearing and really match them to language that's on the framework. And primarily, you'll see that through some strategies for action language, and then in some cases, some language on the outcomes that we sort of flipped a little bit to make sure it puts the verb and the onus on the partners to do the work to get to the outcome. So I just want to point to one, data-informed decisions, and then sort of show you how that's been incorporated into the draft outline of the plan. Again, we go to goal 1, align and coordinate systems, and the major objectives right now within those goals are make data-informed decisions, ensure coordinated services, and promote and share knowledge with then specific activities falling under those buckets. So if you flip back, again, you can see where those pieces are within the Early Childhood Colorado framework. And I would say, given that PQA guided the development of the framework, it is very brilliant and works very, very well in this case. So I think we can be happy that we'll have something that meets federal guidance, but also really reflects where Colorado has been. It's been for a long time, the things that we've been working on. So let's see, we've got about 5 minutes left. I will just buzz through these so you can see, get a taste of where those objectives are. And then again, pardon? Oh, okay, I'll talk really slow then. No, I'm joking. I'll highlight some of this, but again, there will be an opportunity for feedback. Again, align and coordinate systems. I think we've heard a lot about that already. Innovate service delivery. It's very significant, I think, here to point out that right now this is very, very much centered on pieces of mental health, social, emotional development, and some nod to transition supports that are more comprehensive, but certainly include children with special health, behavioral, or developmental needs. Maximize family knowledge and engagement. We have a very big objective here to connect and empower families that seems to work quite well here, and a lot of the strategies will fall under that. Increasing meaningful and access. This includes things like supporting consumer affordability, encouraging public and private approaches, and significantly building community capacity to help with that access. Goal 5 is really about advancing sustainable business practices. And then goal 6, the mega goal, is about quality standards, developing and retaining the workforce, and then, of course, continuous quality improvement, which is going to be so important. So I think we're going to skip this in the interest of time, but no, that does not mean you're not going to give feedback. We are going to send out that survey and make sure that feedback is incorporated. And of course, we are always available if you want to call and have additional questions. We really want to make sure that this reflects and feels good to you, depending on where you sit and what you know about the needs of children and families. Okay, so we are going to tag team a little bit now and jump back to the work that we both conducted and talk about some of the additional themes that we have garnered from some of that work. And that isn't to say anything else that's been mentioned here wasn't very, very important. So access, especially around infant toddler, has been quite significant. Issues of the workforce have been significant. So we are building upon a lot of what you've already heard. And Carrie, I'll pass it over to you. Yeah. Okay. All right, good.
Okay, all right, so just to reiterate again, this isn't everything. This doesn't represent, a comprehensive possible list, but just some findings that came out of our family and stakeholder engagement opportunities. So under a goal 1 of align and coordinate systems, I'm not going to read them word for word for you here, but at least speaking from the family input, there was definitely a number of themes that came out and emerged from those family focus groups related to support for transitions for children from Part C to B, as well as barriers to accessing services. And so that's where you see this information come out around addressing the system administrative barriers to service operations, enhancing and formalizing the process for ongoing coordination and collaboration. That was more of a stakeholder, right? Not so much families. And then goal 2, innovating service delivery. So continuing to have the early childhood mental health consultation using a variety of approaches across the system. I'll see if, Jennifer, you want to add anything to this one?
No, I think, again, it's some things we've already heard during the morning, but this issue of inclusion and especially some additional support for children and families with special health or developmental needs, this has been pretty big, both on the family end. I think we've heard some really sad and desperate stories about families looking to get care for their children and feeling that they don't have opportunities for that. And then feeling like the baton is dropped at really, really crucial times. And we hear some of these things, again, from providers, some concerns that that's not going as well as it could be. And again, themes of coordination, lots of progress made, but we can always do better. So what are the opportunities to keep dropping some of those administrative barriers that maybe are less necessary and keep coordination occurring at all levels of the system, because ultimately that's going to make it easier for children and families.
So I'll start with this one, with maximizing family knowledge and engagement. We definitely heard consistently across our families that they felt like there were cultural barriers for them to accessing supports and services, language barriers, certainly, and also just even understanding of the provider of their own culture and their child's needs. So, for example, that they felt like some problems that maybe a child in a particular program has, the teacher is not really addressing with the parent because of language barriers. It's just too much trouble for them to try to figure out how to communicate the issues, like if it's a toilet training accident or potty they might have wet their pants. And so parents were feeling that breaks down trust with the provider. So there's, lots of little stories and similar to that that each of these families shared related to not feeling necessarily like they were supported by the supports and services that were helping them and their families. And so that's why you see some of this come out here in terms of frustration around language and culture, creating more models to support cultural and linguistic responsive acquisition of services by families. Families talked about how difficult it was to navigate the system. And most of the families, when we asked them, who did they talk to? Where did they go for help? And it was usually their friend. It was somebody down the street that they trusted. It was a trusted relative from nearly all of these focus groups that we spoke with. So if they don't have somebody that understands the system that they trust, or that speaks the language that they trust, they don't access them. It just, I don't understand what it means on the paper, so I'm just going to move on. So that's what you see with this navigation model piece, where that might be coming out. And then, of course, continue to foster family input and decision-making to promote engagement. You want to add to this?
No, I'll just add that, again, Lindsay mentioned, we want to be solution-focused. We actually know there's some local communities that have really focused on navigation models, and success has resulted. We have some documented success on that. So we have some places to build. We know this is a family need. We know it actually works. So this is a pretty big solution that could be quite helpful in helping to maximize family engagement and give more access.
This is a big one for families. So increasing meaningful and equitable access. And I think for most of the families that we spoke with in our focus groups, access was not just about the availability and the number of slots. It was certainly about cost. And I think we had maybe 8% dads were in our focus groups, which mom said, we really need to get more dads in these groups. But most of them said that they'd like to go to school, they'd like to increase their education levels, they'd like to go to work, but they don't. they can't afford anywhere to send their child, and then they don't trust anyone either, other than families or friends to take care of their child either. So for us, definitely in these focus groups, access was a big topic of conversation. A lot of them also spoke to affordability of housing. We have to make ends meet. We have to survive, and so they're just trying to meet those basic sort of survival needs. And when we try to turn conversations around quality, quality is just a side conversation. So really interesting, great conversations there that I think lead to these solutions that we're putting up here around expanding program access, particularly, yes, weekend and off hours, mitigating the cliff effect. So many families talked about just when we are getting our feet under us and we're trying to do better and improve ourselves, we're incentivized to not do that. Some of our immigrant and refugee families, they talked about, at least, I was promised a better life here. I came here for a better life. But I don't have a place, at least where I was. If I had food, I had a place to eat it in. But here, housing is so unstable for them. That's what they're thinking about right now for their child. So the child care conversation is definitely sort of secondary for them. And so this cliff effect was a big conversation for many of them. And then we talked to a lot of moms and dads who actually came, that the weekend and the off hours were really important to those kids, parents that were going to school and trying to improve their economic situation, really needed those off hours and had a really difficult time just bringing their kids with them to the library or to the group projects. And so this one was really a big theme across our family focus groups.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit more. I mean, I think equity, even Carrie, within your strategic plan research, was lighter than expected, and equity issues are much, much stronger from the family perspective than, I think we know they're there, but I think they're coming out loud and clear. So I would say, of anything, issues of equity is probably one of the biggest things the state has some opportunities to work on. And that equity means it could be rural versus urban. There's a lot of ways to look at that, and I know that our needs assessment will be finding that and underscoring that. One idea that came about is Colorado has core public health functions that are available in every county. Do we need something like that in the state where we really have some core supports and services that are available in every county and available and accessible to everyone? So strengthen business practices. I think, we hear this a lot. We know that there are, in the past 10, 15 years, there have been a lot of, especially in the early care and learning sector, a lot of businesses that have gone under or gone away, whether it's family child care homes or centers. Strengthening these business practices and skills is going to be very, very important. There is a sense on the solutions-focused side of things that training, coaching, and mentoring can be very helpful in not only helping to solidify some business practices, but also helping to solidify and support a more engaging and pleasant environment for the workforce, which then will hopefully lead to a stronger workforce and a more sustainable workforce. So I think we all know if the business model doesn't work, it's not going to happen. So this is a very important one as well. And then improving the quality of ECC environments in the workforce. Again, we've heard a lot about this already, but one piece that has come up a few times or several times is this idea of what are we really doing with exploring competency-based evaluation processes, and is there some opportunity there to expand the pipeline, increase recruitment and retention? So, I mean, we do, if we can take 7 to 10 minutes, I suppose we can, should we go for it?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go for it.
Okay, so we have kind of 3 reflection questions after we just dumped all of that at you. Take 5 minutes now to tell us what you think. So, do we want to go for the Padlet, or?
Yeah, let's give it a try.
So there's a couple different ways you can provide your input here. So you might have picked up a handout that said how to access a Padlet. If you haven't accessed a Padlet, it's basically just like an online bulletin board. So we wanted to provide an opportunity for people online to be part of this conversation. And so there is a handout, I think, that was sent, and I think, are you putting the link to the Padlet in the chat box?
It's right in the,
Yeah.
and then it's also here.
You don't have to have a Padlet account to access it. In any case, while you're thinking about if you want to do that, or you just want to do sticky notes if you're in the room, that's fine too. We will take that. But the Padlet, I would pull it up if I could. It's just one opportunity or one way that you can provide some feedback around these 3 questions. So we want you to think about if there's a priority PDG goals, the 6 goals.
And you should have a piece of.
There's a handout. Yep.
At your table, read like that.
Which of those goals, if any, do we need to focus additional objectives on? And you've got that handout that has all of the goals and the objectives. Do you want to pause or just go through all of them?
Let's go through all of
Okay.
them and then give people, 7 minutes or so.
Like Jennifer said, there's a lot that's going on that we probably don't even know half of it, that can be leveraged to address many of these things, or at least partner, right? And I know that as well from looking at all the strategic plans and reports that you all turned in. There's a lot going on at state, regional, and local levels that would help and support and could be leveraged to address many of these things. So what is underway, what is planned, or what could be leveraged that you know of, whether that's in your own organization or others, that would be able to address these issues that we just raised in the feedback, in the stakeholder and family feedback that Jennifer and I just talked about. And then thinking about the current goals, objectives, and input that we heard today, really fast, is there anything significant that is missing?
And you have a copy of those goals and objectives that you have. And I think, yeah, we can, if the Padlet's open, we can open that. But certainly use your sticky notes, mark on your pieces of paper, circle anything, and take about, if you can take 7 minutes to do that, that would be great.
I can open up over there.
Jennifer, can I just make a comment?
Sure.
Listening to the description of parents talking about their experience with providers, I guess I would just want us to be mindful that that's from a particular perspective, and the characterization of teachers as not wanting to work hard or something being too difficult. I just want to make sure that we don't think that all of our providers. So, thanks.
Absolutely, yeah. So that is the experience of some and not all, of course.
Jennifer, can I ask a question?
So we use the word system a lot to all the goals and the objectives, and I'm just wondering if you talked about how we're defining that. So in goal 3, maximize family knowledge and engagement, it says children and families that enter the system. Is that healthcare? How are you?
Yeah, that's a great question that systems is not a definition that the needs assessment is using. So this may be something that Office of Early Childhood actually needs to define to ensure we understand what the system is. And I'm sort of looking at Letty out of the corner of my eye going, it's not a system, of course, it's a system of systems. So having a good definition of that will probably be very, very important for the office. Thank you.
Yeah, and I know I've said this before, but I also think provider. So when PDG first came a year ago, I had said, how are we defining providers? So I think system and provider, just because when we say children and family enter the system within the context of this, I'm like, is that, they're only going to do that through the early
So I'll pitch that back to needs assessment. Is provider, a definition or, and maybe I should know this, is Lindsay, is provider a definition within, the grant at least? So,
So we don't have a definition for provider that has been defined by the funding announcement or application. However, the needs assessment group is helping us define provider.
okay.
And so while formal care provider is pretty well defined through licensing, there is a definition again that they're requesting input on regarding the informal providers.
Okay. Is that helpful? So, okay, so it sounds like it will be focused on care.
Yeah, so we did break out some additional definitions. So we have formal child care provider that speaks really to early care and learning. And then we have this broader service provider that is more inclusive of professionals in that birth to five system. So we did break those out so that there are some different definitions through the needs assessments. As we identify need, we're at least using those terms. Again, we're doing everything at once, and so some of those definitions will be likely incorporated into the strategic plan and renewal grant once we're finalizing that definition work.
So that important note, and if you can just jot it down and then reinforce that on the survey too, I think that will be very important.
And there are requests for that in the needs assessment, and I think that we have a solid definition in terms of providers in the licensed formal settings, probably less so, and perhaps open to ideas about what that looks like in FFN or friends, family, neighbor, or that kind. But there is a requirement that we sort of think through those and provide our working definitions of those. They know what we're talking about. So Jennifer, if I could just comment on the question over here about sort of what selection bias really, and how do we figure out what are representative of the community at large, comments that are representative of the community at large versus the people who choose to take a night to show up at a focus group. Generally speaking, those people have something to say about it, right? And so we've done some work parsing the data, looking at it in different kinds of ways. And so we get, for example, your preference about whether or not you'd like to have your child in a licensed facility really varies depending on if your kid is in a licensed facility versus if your kid's in a family or neighborhood setting. And so we've taken the data and looked at it in a variety of different ways, and so that it's not skewed based upon a population that's being served in the particular setting, right? And so, but it's challenging in the analysis, and we'll probably make recommendations about how that could be improved in the future with our surveying techniques.
Great. So if there are just 2 more minutes for questions maybe, and Letty, I'll pitch it back to you. But again, if you've written anything on a sticky note or a piece of paper, just make sure, we want to make sure we get that. So we'll be at the doors and catch you, make sure we get it. But also there will be this opportunity for the survey to spend a little bit more time on that. It's very, very important. So we want to make sure that we hear from everyone broadly. Any other reactions to this sort of flood of information that you have received? Any outstanding questions at this point about our work or the other pieces of work that you've heard today? Yes.
Who makes the decisions as far as children and their risk factors? I currently have 2 CDD programs in Jefferson County, and I'm a private provider, and I'm getting very significant pushback on them allowing children into our program.
That sounds like...
From a CDE perspective. I'm sorry, I missed that one. What was?
Well, who makes the decisions as far as Who makes the decisions as far as the risk factors for CPP and allowing children into the program?
So risk factors are defined in statute.
Correct.
And so local programs need to use those risk factors as part of the criteria for funding students in. Now, keep in mind that districts also have a limited number of slots, and so they need to allocate those according to the level of risk for the students who are applying for those dollars.
Okay, because I have students with risk factors and they're telling us they're not allowing them into our program.
So I'm going to leave you my card so
Okay,
you can contact
that'd be
me.
great, thank you.
Okay, I think we will pass it back to Letty Bass. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to your comments on the survey as well.
Thank you all, and again, I would love to reiterate that our comments, our feedback is so important, and this is the critical time, right, Lindsay, for that feedback and those comments. Lots of work is going into this, and as I look at it and I think about it, and I also think about what's going on at the governor's office as well, and how all of this will be aligned.
So we're going to move to public comment. Christina, do we have anyone for public comment? Nicole?
Hi, Nicole Real with Executives Partnering to Invest in Children. So my comment here is, and I know a lot of this is still in the works and being finalized, but I haven't heard a lot today about the role of employers in business and how they can support families with a lot of these issues. And as I've been having a lot more conversations with business owners, with business leaders, chambers of commerce, et cetera, they continually hear about the issue of access and affordability for childcare, but they want to know very specifically how they can help and what they should do. So I would just like to encourage our partners who are working on the strategic plan, who are working on the needs assessment, we need to have very specific recommendations and activities that we can carry back to the business community, because we have chambers and employers and lots of great people out there who care very deeply about Colorado being a wonderful state to work and live in, about children and families in their workforce. And if we can give them very specific things to do to support efforts, then they're, I believe, more than willing to do so.
Thank you. Any other comments on this topic or others? All right, thank you. Member updates, Christina, I don't think we have, do we have?
This is Christina. I'll give one quick update. The Early Childhood and School Readiness Legislative Commission is a group of legislators that meets during the interim. They have met 3 times, and they will be meeting one more time on October 30th to look at some potential bills around supporting early childhood and workforce and school readiness activities. So I would just encourage folks, you can either attend those meetings at the Capitol, or you can call, there's a link on the General Assembly's website that you can listen to and hear what's going on and hear sort of what they're thinking around some of the issues that we've been talking around today. So that's October 30th, and if you go to the General Assembly website, you can see it there.
Wonderful. And then agenda topics for future meetings. If you have ideas or if there is anything you want to share, please share it with Christina within the next 2 weeks. After that with Amanda. And we are all wishing Christina the very best, as her little baby boy is going to be coming in early November. So thank you. And she'll be taking off. You want to talk a little bit about your timing with this large group?
Hopefully, knock on wood, you will not come early, but planning to take off all of November and all of December, and so Amanda will be your main contact for that. And then we'll see how things go, but I'll plan to come back probably in mid-January on a part-time basis. So I'll be pretty much out, though November and December is the plan, and so reach out to Amanda with anything that you need. Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks.
All right. Thank you all. Any other comments or? are there any comments online? Any, additional input from those who are on the webinar? No? Thank you all. Our meeting is adjourned, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.